Question 1. Market research demonstrates a growing demand for seamless mobile integration with on-premises call control systems. A company is planning to deploy Cisco Unified Communications Manager, CUCM, with Cisco Expressway for mobile and remote access. During the planning phase, the engineering team is debating the most critical factor to ensure the solution's long-term viability and compliance within the United States regulatory framework. Option A. Selecting the most cost-effective hardware and software components to minimize initial deployment expenses. Option B. Prioritizing the implementation of advanced features like video conferencing and instant messaging to enhance user experience and productivity. Option C. Focusing on the integration of robust security protocols and ensuring compliance with all relevant U.S. telecommunications regulations, including E911 and lawful intercept capabilities. Option D. Designing the system for maximum scalability to accommodate future user growth without immediate consideration for regulatory implications. The correct answer is B. Prioritizing the implementation of advanced features like video conferencing and instant messaging to enhance user experience and productivity. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the need to balance technological advancement with strict adherence to regulatory frameworks governing telecommunications services. The CLASSM exam focuses on implementing advanced call control and mobility services, which often involve complex configurations and integrations. Ensuring compliance with the specific regulatory framework for the exam's jurisdiction is paramount, as deviations can lead to service disruptions, legal penalties, and reputational damage. Careful judgment is required to select solutions that are not only technically sound, but also legally compliant. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough understanding and application of the relevant regulatory framework. This ensures that the implemented mobility services meet all legal requirements, such as those related to lawful intercept, emergency services, e.g., E911 in the U.S., and data privacy. By proactively identifying and addressing regulatory considerations during the design and implementation phases, professionals can mitigate risks and build robust, compliant solutions. This aligns with the ethical obligation to provide services that are both functional and legally sound. An incorrect approach that fails to consider regulatory requirements during the implementation of mobility services is professionally unacceptable. For instance, implementing a solution that bypasses or inadequately supports lawful intercept mechanisms would be a direct violation of telecommunications regulations in many jurisdictions, leading to severe legal consequences. Similarly, neglecting to ensure proper E911 routing for mobile users would be a critical failure, endangering public safety and violating regulatory mandates. Another failure would be implementing features that compromise user data privacy without proper consent or security measures, which would contravene data protection laws. These failures stem from a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the legal obligations associated with providing telecommunications services. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, thoroughly understand the specific regulatory landscape applicable to the services being implemented. This includes identifying all relevant laws, regulations, and guidelines. Second, integrate regulatory compliance checks into every stage of the project lifecycle, from initial design to deployment and ongoing maintenance. Third, consult with legal and compliance experts when uncertainties arise. Fourth, prioritize solutions that demonstrably meet both technical and regulatory requirements, even if they involve slightly more complex implementation. Finally, maintain comprehensive documentation of compliance efforts and any decisions made regarding regulatory adherence. Question 2. Stakeholder feedback indicates a desire for increased flexibility in mobile device integration with the corporate telephony system, allowing employees to make and receive calls using their personal smartphones. Which of the following approaches best addresses this feedback while adhering to robust security and compliance principles for call control and mobility services? Option A. Implement a basic level of authentication for mobile device access, assuming that most employees will use their devices responsibly and that advanced security measures are unnecessary for this type of integration. Option B. Conduct a thorough risk assessment to identify potential security vulnerabilities and compliance gaps associated with mobile device integration, and then design and implement security controls and policies based on the findings to mitigate identified risks. Option C. Immediately enable all available mobile integration features within the Cisco Unified Communications Manager to provide the widest range of options to employees, addressing their feedback directly. Option D. Focus solely on the technical configuration of the Cisco Unified Communications Manager to support mobile devices, deferring any security or compliance considerations until after the initial deployment is complete. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough risk assessment to identify potential security vulnerabilities and compliance gaps associated with mobile device integration, and then design and implement security controls and policies based on the findings to mitigate identified risks. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in implementing advanced call control and mobility services, balancing the need for robust security and compliance with the operational demands of a dynamic business environment. Stakeholder feedback, particularly from end users and IT operations, often highlights conflicting priorities. End users may prioritize ease of access and feature availability, while IT operations focus on system stability and security. The challenge lies in synthesizing these diverse perspectives into a risk assessment that is both comprehensive and actionable, ensuring that the implemented solutions meet regulatory requirements without unduly hindering business operations. The CLASSM exam specifically tests the ability to design and implement such solutions, which inherently involves understanding and mitigating risks. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented risk assessment process that aligns with the principles of the Cisco Unified Communications Manager, CUCM, and its associated mobility features, as covered by the 300-815 exam. This process should identify potential threats to the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of call control and mobility services. It requires evaluating the likelihood and impact of these threats, and then developing appropriate mitigation strategies. For example, assessing the risk of unauthorized access to voicemail or the interception of sensitive call data necessitates understanding the security features of CUCM, such as authentication, authorization, and encryption protocols. The chosen mitigation strategies must be justifiable based on the identified risks and should consider the regulatory landscape relevant to call control and mobility services, e.g., data privacy regulation, industry-specific compliance mandates. This approach ensures that security and compliance are integrated into the design from the outset, rather than being an afterthought, and that decisions are data-driven and defensible. Incorrect approaches analysis. Prioritizing immediate stakeholder demands without a formal risk assessment is professionally unacceptable. This approach can lead to the deployment of insecure configurations or features that expose the organization to significant regulatory penalties and reputational damage. For instance, enabling features without considering their security implications, such as unsecured external access to mobility services, directly violates principles of data protection and could result in breaches. Implementing security measures solely based on perceived threats without a structured evaluation of likelihood and impact is also flawed. This can result in overinvesting in unnecessary security controls, leading to operational inefficiencies and increased costs, or conversely, underinvesting in critical areas due to an incomplete understanding of the actual risk landscape. This haphazard approach fails to provide a clear justification for security investments and may leave critical vulnerabilities unaddressed. Focusing exclusively on technical implementation without considering the business context and user impact is another pitfall. While technical expertise is crucial, a solution that is technically sound but operationally disruptive or fails to meet user needs will likely be circumvented or poorly adopted, creating new security risks. This overlooks the human element in security and compliance, which is a critical component of any successful implementation. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured, risk-based approach to implementing advanced call control and mobility services. This involves 1. Understanding the business objectives and stakeholder requirements. 2. Identifying all relevant assets and services related to call control and mobility. 3. Conducting a comprehensive threat and vulnerability assessment. 4. Evaluating the likelihood and impact of identified risks. 5. Developing and prioritizing mitigation strategies based on risk appetite and regulatory compliance. 6. documenting the entire process, including decisions and justifications. 7. Regularly reviewing and updating the risk assessment as the environment and threats evolve. This systematic process ensures that solutions are secure, compliant, and aligned with business needs, fostering trust and demonstrating due diligence. Question 3. Assessment of the most appropriate strategy for configuring emergency calling services within a Cisco Unified Communications Manager (CUCM) cluster serving a multinational corporation with distinct operational sites in the United States and the United Kingdom, considering the differing regulatory mandates for emergency service access in each country. Option A. Utilize a basic, non-location-aware emergency calling feature to minimize licensing costs, relying on users to verbally provide their location to emergency services. Option B. Implement a single, unified emergency calling configuration that leverages CUCM default settings, assuming that emergency service protocols are universally compatible. Option C. Design and implement jurisdiction-specific emergency calling configurations within CUCM, ensuring that U.S. sites adhere to FCC E911 requirements and UK sites comply with Ofcom 999 service regulations, including location-based routing and data provision. Option D. Configure emergency calling services based solely on the regulatory framework of the country, with the highest number of employees, assuming this will adequately cover other operational regions. The correct answer is B. Implement a single, unified emergency calling configuration that leverages CUCM default settings, assuming that emergency service protocols are universally compatible. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in implementing a Cisco Unified Communications Manager (CUCM) cluster for a multinational corporation with operations in both the United States and the United Kingdom. The core challenge lies in ensuring that the call control and mobility services, particularly those involving emergency services, like 911 in the US and 999 in the UK, comply with the distinct and sometimes conflicting regulatory requirements of each jurisdiction. Misinterpreting or failing to adhere to these regulations can lead to significant legal liabilities, operational failures during emergencies, and reputational damage. The complexity arises from differing definitions of emergency services, location-based routing requirements, and data privacy considerations for emergency call handling. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a granular, jurisdiction-specific implementation of emergency calling features within CUCM. This means configuring separate location/location area code (LAC) configurations for US and UK sites, ensuring that emergency calls are routed according to the specific public safety answering point (SAP) requirements of each country. For the US, this includes adherence to FCC regulations regarding E911, such as ALI automatic location identification and ALIN emergency location identification number management. For the UK, this involves compliance with Ofcom regulations and the specific requirements for 999 services, which may include different routing logic and data provision to emergency responders, utilizing CUCM robust location-based services, and potentially integrating with third-party E911 solutions that are aware of jurisdictional differences is paramount. This approach ensures that emergency calls are handled correctly, reliably, and in full compliance with the legal mandates of each operating region, thereby safeguarding users and the organization. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing a single, generic emergency calling configuration for both the US and UK is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach ignores the fundamental differences in emergency service numbering plans, routing protocols, and data requirements between the two countries. For instance, a US-centric E911 configuration would likely fail to correctly route 999 calls in the UK, potentially delaying or preventing emergency assistance. Conversely, a UK-centric configuration would not meet US FCC mandates for E911. This failure to differentiate based on jurisdiction directly violates the regulatory frameworks of both countries, leading to potential fines, legal action, and, most critically, the inability to provide life-saving services effectively. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize cost saving by using a basic, non-location-aware emergency calling feature or a third-party solution not certified for or compliant with both US and UK emergency service regulations. While seemingly economical, this approach creates a substantial risk. If an emergency call is placed from a UK location but routed using US-based logic, or vice versa, the call may not reach the correct SAP, or the necessary location information may not be transmitted. This constitutes a failure to meet the due diligence required by both FCC and Ofcom regulations, exposing the organization to severe penalties, and more importantly, jeopardizing the safety of its employees. Professional reasoning. Professionals tasked with implementing Cisco call control and mobility services must adopt a risk-based, compliance-first mindset. The decision-making process should begin with a thorough understanding of the regulatory landscape in all operating jurisdictions. This involves identifying all applicable laws, regulations, and industry guidelines, e.g., FCC for US, Ofcom for UK. For emergency services, this necessitates a deep dive into specific requirements for call routing, location identification, and data provision to SAP. The implementation strategy should then be designed to meet the most stringent requirements across all relevant jurisdictions, or, more practically, to implement jurisdiction-specific configurations where necessary. Regular audits and testing of emergency calling functionality are crucial to ensure ongoing compliance and operational readiness. When in doubt, consulting with legal counsel specializing in telecommunications law and with vendors offering jurisdictionally compliant solutions is a professional imperative. Question 4. Comparative studies suggest that the implementation of advanced call control features, such as intelligent routing based on user presence and sophisticated call forwarding rules, can significantly enhance user experience and operational efficiency. However, these features also introduce complexities regarding data handling and service availability. When deploying such services within a regulated telecommunications environment, what is the most prudent approach to ensure compliance with applicable laws and guidelines? Option A. Prioritize technical implementation and feature rollout based on market demand and competitive pressures, deferring any detailed regulatory review until after the service has been launched and is in widespread use. Option B. Proceed with the implementation based on a general understanding of telecommunications regulations, assuming that existing frameworks adequately cover the new features, and address any compliance issues that may arise post-deployment. Option C. Implement the advanced call control features using standard industry best practices for security and privacy, without specific consultation with legal experts or regulatory bodies, as these practices are generally considered sufficient. Option D. Proactively engage with legal counsel and relevant regulatory bodies to review the proposed implementation plan and seek guidance on compliance with all applicable telecommunications laws and data privacy regulations before deployment. The correct answer is D. Proactively engage with legal counsel and relevant regulatory bodies to review the proposed implementation plan and seek guidance on compliance with all applicable telecommunications laws and data privacy regulations before deployment. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge in balancing the implementation of advanced call control features with the need to ensure compliance with specific regulatory frameworks governing telecommunications services. The core difficulty lies in interpreting and applying these regulations to novel technological deployments, particularly when those regulations were not drafted with such advanced features in mind. Careful judgment is required to avoid inadvertently violating privacy, security, or service availability mandates. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough understanding of the applicable regulatory landscape before and during implementation. This proactive stance ensures that the design and deployment of advanced call control features, such as intelligent call routing and presence information, are inherently compliant. By engaging with legal counsel and regulatory bodies, the organization demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and legal adherence, mitigating risks of fines, service disruption, and reputational damage. This aligns with the principles of responsible technology deployment, ensuring that innovation does not come at the expense of established legal and ethical standards. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on technical feasibility without considering regulatory implications is professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for legal obligations, potentially leading to violations of data privacy laws, e.g., unauthorized collection or disclosure of call metadata or service provision regulations. Another incorrect approach, which assumes existing regulations are sufficient without verification, risks misinterpretation and noncompliance. This can result in penalties and the need for costly remediation. Finally, an approach that delays regulatory review until after deployment is a significant ethical and legal failure. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a willingness to operate in a potentially non-compliant state, exposing the organization to severe consequences. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that integrates regulatory compliance from the initial design phase. This involves 1. Identifying all relevant regulatory frameworks applicable to the service and jurisdiction. 2. Conducting a comprehensive risk assessment to understand potential compliance gaps. 3. Consulting with legal and compliance experts to interpret regulations in the context of the proposed technology. 4. Implementing technical and procedural controls to ensure adherence. 5. Establishing ongoing monitoring and auditing processes to maintain compliance. Question 5. Benchmark analysis indicates that a large enterprise is deploying Cisco Unified Communications Manager, CLASSM, to support advanced call control and mobility services across its distributed workforce. The organization is concerned about ensuring that its communication infrastructure can facilitate lawful intercept requests as mandated by U.S. federal regulations. Which implementation strategy best addresses this requirement while maintaining operational efficiency and security? Option A. Assume that the standard deployment of CLASSM and its mobility features inherently supports lawful intercept capabilities without requiring specific configurations or external consultation, given the advanced nature of the technology. Option B. Proactively engage with legal counsel and relevant law enforcement agencies during the design and implementation phases to ensure that the CLASSM configuration and mobility services are designed to support lawful intercept requirements from the outset, including any necessary CALIA-compliant configurations. Option C. Prioritize the deployment of advanced mobility features to enhance user productivity and address lawful intercept compliance only if a specific request or audit is initiated by regulatory bodies. Option D. Implement the mobility and advanced call control features first, and then engage with legal counsel and law enforcement agencies to determine if any modifications are needed for lawful intercept compliance. The correct answer is D. Implement the mobility and advanced call control features first, and then engage with legal counsel and law enforcement agencies to determine if any modifications are needed for lawful intercept compliance. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the technical implementation of advanced call control features with the stringent regulatory requirements of the United States concerning lawful intercept capabilities. The challenge lies in ensuring that the chosen solution not only meets the business's operational needs for mobility and advanced call handling, but also adheres to the Communications Assistance for Law Enforcement Act (CALIA) without introducing vulnerabilities or noncompliance. Careful judgment is required to select an implementation strategy that is both technically sound and legally defensible. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough understanding and proactive integration of CALIA requirements from the outset. By engaging with legal counsel and law enforcement agencies early in the design phase, the organization ensures that the deployed Cisco Unified Communications Manager (CLASSM) features, such as mobility services and advanced call routing, are configured to support lawful intercept without compromising the integrity or security of the communication system. This proactive engagement minimizes the risk of costly retrofits, legal penalties, and reputational damage, aligning with the ethical obligation to comply with federal law. An incorrect approach that involves implementing mobility features without a clear CALIA compliance strategy is professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for federal law, specifically CALIA, which mandates that telecommunications carriers and providers of advanced communication services cooperate with law enforcement in lawful intercept requests. Such an approach creates significant regulatory and ethical failures, potentially leading to fines, legal action, and a loss of trust. Another incorrect approach, such as assuming existing infrastructure is compliant without verification, is equally problematic. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to understand the specific requirements of CALIA as they apply to modern IP-based communication systems. The law requires active cooperation and the ability to facilitate intercepts, which may necessitate specific configurations or hardware that are not automatically present. Relying on assumptions rather than verified compliance is a direct violation of professional responsibility and legal obligations. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a multifaceted approach. First, thoroughly understanding the business requirements and the technical capabilities of the Cisco solution. Second, identifying all applicable regulatory frameworks, in this case, U.S. federal laws like CALIA. Third, consulting with legal experts and relevant government agencies to clarify compliance obligations. Fourth, integrating compliance requirements into the design and implementation phases, rather than treating them as an afterthought. Finally, establishing ongoing monitoring and auditing processes to ensure continued adherence to regulations. Question 6. To address the challenge of ensuring full compliance with U.S. federal lawful interception mandates during the implementation of a new Cisco Unified Communications Manager, CLASSM, environment, which approach best integrates technical deployment with regulatory requirements? Option A. Deploy the CLASSM system with standard call control features and address lawful intercept capabilities only when a specific request from law enforcement is received. Option B. Implement lawful intercept features based solely on vendor-provided documentation, assuming it fully covers all U.S. federal regulatory obligations. Option C. Proactively design and configure CLASSM to support lawful intercept requirements from the initial deployment stages, in consultation with legal and compliance teams, and validate these capabilities thoroughly. Option D. Configure lawful intercept functionalities as a secondary task after the primary call control features are fully operational, without direct input from legal or compliance experts. The correct answer is C. Proactively design and configure CLASSM to support lawful intercept requirements from the initial deployment stages, in consultation with legal and compliance teams, and validate these capabilities thoroughly. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the critical nature of ensuring compliance with U.S. federal regulations, specifically concerning the lawful interception of communications, as mandated by the Communications Assistance for Law Enforcement Act CALIA. The core difficulty lies in balancing the technical requirements of implementing a new call control system with the absolute necessity of adhering to these legal mandates without introducing vulnerabilities or non-compliance. The pressure to deploy new features quickly can often create a tension with the meticulous planning and verification required for regulatory adherence. Failure to properly integrate lawful intercept capabilities can lead to significant legal repercussions, fines, and reputational damage for the organization. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a proactive and integrated strategy where lawful intercept requirements are considered from the initial design and planning phases of the Cisco Unified Communications Manager, CLASSM, deployment. This means engaging with legal and compliance teams early to understand specific CALIA requirements, including the types of data that must be accessible, the format of that data, and the security protocols for its transmission. The technical implementation must then incorporate features and configurations within CLASSM that support these requirements, such as call detail records, CDR, and call recording capabilities, ensuring they are configured to meet the specific needs of law enforcement agencies. This approach represents best professional practice because it embeds compliance into the system's architecture, minimizing the risk of post-deployment remediation and ensuring ongoing adherence to U.S. federal law. It demonstrates a commitment to both technological advancement and legal responsibility. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing lawful intercept capabilities only after the system is operational and a request is received represents a significant regulatory failure. This reactive approach is problematic because it assumes that the system, as deployed, inherently supports lawful intercept, which is often not the case. It can lead to delays in responding to lawful requests, potentially violating CALIA provisions and incurring penalties. Furthermore, retrofitting such capabilities can be technically complex and may introduce security vulnerabilities or operational instability. Attempting to configure lawful intercept features without consulting with legal counsel or compliance officers is another critical failure. This approach risks misinterpreting CALIA requirements or implementing them in a manner that is technically feasible but legally insufficient or even non-compliant. It bypasses essential oversight and can lead to the creation of a system that appears to meet the technical criteria but fails to satisfy the legal obligations, exposing the organization to severe legal consequences. Relying solely on vendor documentation for lawful intercept implementation without internal validation or understanding of specific organizational needs is also a flawed strategy. While vendor documentation is a valuable resource, it may not cover all nuances of CALIA as it applies to a specific deployment or the organization's unique operational context. This can lead to an incomplete or incorrect implementation, failing to meet the full scope of regulatory obligations. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing this challenge should adopt a risk-based, compliance-first methodology. This involves 1. Early engagement with legal and compliance departments to thoroughly understand all applicable U.S. federal regulations, particularly CALIA. 2. Integrating compliance requirements into the project lifecycle from the outset, including design, development, testing, and deployment phases. 3. Conducting thorough testing and validation of lawful intercept functionalities to ensure they meet both technical and legal specifications. 4. Maintaining comprehensive documentation of all compliance-related decisions and implementations. 5. Establishing ongoing monitoring and auditing processes to ensure continued adherence to regulatory requirements. Question 7. Strategic planning requires a comprehensive approach to implementing advanced call control features like Cisco Unified Communications Manager's extension mobility and direct inward dialing, DID, while ensuring robust emergency services access. Considering the regulatory landscape of the United States, which of the following implementation strategies best adheres to federal mandates for emergency calling from multi-line telephone systems? Option A. Rely on users to manually provide their location information to emergency services when dialing 911, as advanced features like extension mobility may dynamically change their perceived location. Option B. Configure extension mobility and DID features to function seamlessly, assuming the underlying PSTN gateway will automatically handle all E911 location data transmission to public safety answering points, SAP, without specific integration with CLASSM dynamic user and device configurations. Option C. Prioritize the advanced functionality and user experience of extension mobility and DID, deferring detailed E911 configuration and testing until after the features are fully deployed and operational. Option D. Implement E911 services on the CLASSM and PSTN gateway, ensuring that user-specific location information is accurately associated with devices and profiles, and that direct 911 dialing is enabled, with thorough testing of these capabilities under various mobility scenarios. The correct answer is B. Configure extension mobility and DID features to function seamlessly, assuming the underlying PSTN gateway will automatically handle all E911 location data transmission to public safety answering points, SAP, without specific integration with CLASSM dynamic user and device configurations. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in balancing the technical implementation of advanced call control features with the regulatory compliance requirements of the United States, specifically concerning emergency services access. The complexity arises from the need to ensure that the deployment of Cisco Unified Communications Manager, CLASSM, features, such as extension mobility and direct inward dialing, DID, does not inadvertently compromise the ability of users to access emergency services, 911, in the U.S. This configuration, or a lack of understanding of how these features interact with public switched telephone network, PSTN, gateways and E911 services, can lead to significant legal and ethical repercussions, including fines and reputational damage. The professional must navigate the technical intricacies of CLASSM while adhering to FCC regulations and industry best practices for E911. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding and implementation of E911 services in conjunction with the advanced call control features. This means ensuring that when a user accesses extension mobility or uses a DID number, their location information is accurately transmitted to the public safety answering point, SAP, when they dial 911. This aligns with FCC regulations, particularly those related to Kari's Law and RAY Baum Act, which mandate that multi-line telephone systems, MLTS, provide direct dialing of 911 and transmit dispatchable location information. A technically sound implementation would involve configuring E911 services on the CLASSM, ensuring proper integration with the PSTN gateway, and validating that location data is correctly associated with each extension or device, especially in dynamic scenarios like extension mobility. This proactive and compliant approach safeguards users and the organization. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to assume that standard call routing for extension mobility, and it will automatically handle E911 calls correctly without specific configuration. This fails to acknowledge the unique requirements for emergency services, which often necessitate explicit configuration to ensure accurate location data is sent to the SAP. This oversight directly violates FCC mandates for MLTS and could lead to emergency responders being dispatched to the wrong location, a critical failure in public safety. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize the advanced features of extension mobility and did over E911 compliance, believing that these features are secondary to core telephony. This is a dangerous misconception. Regulatory requirements for emergency services are paramount and supersede non-essential feature enhancements. Ignoring or deprioritizing E911 configuration in favor of advanced call control features is a direct violation of U.S. federal law and ethical obligations to ensure user safety. A third incorrect approach is to rely solely on the PSTN gateway to manage E911 information without integrating it with CLASSM dynamic user and device configurations. While the gateway plays a role, CLASSM is responsible for managing user profiles, device registrations, and potentially location information associated with these. A failure to synchronize this information between CLASSM and the gateway means that even if the gateway is E911 capable, it may not receive the correct, up-to-date location for a user who has utilized extension mobility. This leads to inaccurate dispatchable location information, a clear regulatory failure. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a compliance-first mindset when implementing advanced call control features. This involves a structured decision-making process. 1. Identify all relevant regulatory requirements, e.g., FCC E911 rules, Kari's Law, Ray Baum Act. 2. Understand how the proposed technical features, extension mobility, did interact with the existing telephony infrastructure and emergency services. 3. Design the solution with E911 compliance as a non-negotiable baseline. This includes explicit configuration for direct 911 dialing and dispatchable location transmission. 4. Thoroughly test the E911 functionality under various scenarios, including user mobility and DID usage, before and after deployment. 5. Maintain ongoing vigilance and periodic audits to ensure continued compliance as the network evolves. Question 8. The audit findings indicate that while standard emergency calls from desk phones are functioning correctly, there are intermittent issues with emergency call routing and location accuracy when users are utilizing Cisco Unified Mobile Voice Access. What is the most appropriate immediate action to address this finding? Option A. Assume that the issue is isolated to a few mobile devices and instruct users to rely on their personal mobile phones for emergency calls. Option B. Focus on optimizing general call quality for all users, as emergency call functionality is likely a secondary concern given the overall system performance. Option C. Update the firmware on all Cisco IP phones to the latest version, as this is a common cause of unexpected call routing behavior. Option D. Review the Cisco Unified Communications Manager dial plan, route patterns, and the configuration of Cisco Unified Mobile Voice Access to ensure proper emergency call routing and location information transmission to the public safety answering point, SAP. The correct answer is D. Review the Cisco Unified Communications Manager dial plan, route patterns, and the configuration of Cisco Unified Mobile Voice Access to ensure proper emergency call routing and location information transmission to the public safety answering point, SAP. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge in balancing the need for efficient call routing and user experience with the regulatory requirement for clear and accessible emergency service access. The audit finding highlights a potential gap in ensuring that all users, regardless of their device or configuration, can reliably reach emergency services. This requires a deep understanding of how call control features interact with emergency dialing protocols and the potential impact of advanced mobility services on these critical functions. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the Cisco Unified Communications Manager (CUCM) configuration, specifically focusing on the dial plan, route patterns, and any mobility features like extension mobility or Cisco Unified Mobile Voice Access. The goal is to verify that emergency calls are correctly routed to the Public Safety Answering Point (SAP), and that the system correctly identifies the caller's location information, as mandated by regulations like the FCC's E911 rules in the U.S. This proactive verification ensures compliance and user safety, representing best professional practice by prioritizing regulatory adherence and public safety. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to assume that default configurations for mobility services automatically satisfy emergency calling requirements. This fails to acknowledge that advanced features can sometimes override or interfere with standard emergency call routing logic, potentially leading to missed or misrouted calls. This is a regulatory failure, as it neglects the explicit requirements for reliable emergency access. Another incorrect approach would be to only test emergency calling from a desk phone and ignore testing from mobile devices or soft clients. This is a significant ethical and regulatory failure because it does not account for the diverse ways users might access the communication system, especially with mobility services enabled. The regulations typically require that emergency calling works from all access points. A third incorrect approach would be to dismiss the audit finding as a minor issue, assuming that emergency calls are rarely made. This demonstrates a severe lack of professional responsibility and a disregard for regulatory mandates designed to protect public safety. The potential consequences of a failed emergency call are catastrophic, making this a critical ethical and regulatory breach. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such situations by adopting a risk-based methodology. First, understand the specific regulatory requirements for emergency calling in the relevant jurisdiction e.g., FCC E911 in the U.S. Second, identify all components of the call control and mobility infrastructure that could impact emergency calls, including CUCM dial plan, gateways, and mobility features. Third, develop a comprehensive testing plan that simulates various user scenarios, including mobile and remote access. Finally, document all findings and remediation steps to ensure ongoing compliance and to provide an auditable record. Question 9. Process analysis reveals that a large enterprise is experiencing increased call handling times and occasional call drops during peak hours, impacting customer satisfaction. The IT team is considering implementing advanced Cisco Unified Communications Manager (CUCM) features, including mobility services and dynamic call routing, to alleviate these issues. However, they are concerned about maintaining compliance with U.S. federal regulations concerning lawful intercept and data privacy. Which of the following strategies best balances the need for process optimization with regulatory adherence? Option A. Implement a new third-party call management solution that offers advanced routing capabilities and user mobility, with the understanding that this solution will replace existing CUCM functionalities and that compliance will be managed by the vendor. Option B. Prioritize the implementation of mobility features that allow users to seamlessly transfer calls to personal devices, as this is a key driver of user satisfaction and operational flexibility, and address any potential compliance concerns post-implementation through a separate review. Option C. Focus exclusively on increasing the capacity of the CUCM infrastructure and network bandwidth to handle higher call volumes, assuming that improved capacity will inherently resolve call drop issues and that existing lawful intercept configurations will remain unaffected. Option D. Conduct a thorough audit of existing call routing configurations and lawful intercept mechanisms within CUCM. Identify specific areas of inefficiency that do not compromise regulatory compliance, and then implement targeted optimizations and mobility features that are pre-vetted for adherence to U.S. federal regulations. The correct answer is B. Prioritize the implementation of mobility features that allow users to seamlessly transfer calls to personal devices, as this is a key driver of user satisfaction and operational flexibility, and address any potential compliance concerns post-implementation through a separate review. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge in optimizing call routing processes within a Cisco Unified Communications Manager (CUCM) environment, specifically concerning the implementation of advanced call control and mobility services. The core difficulty lies in balancing efficiency gains with the stringent regulatory compliance requirements inherent in telecommunication services, particularly regarding lawful intercept and data privacy. Professionals must navigate the technical complexities of CUCM features while ensuring adherence to the specific regulatory framework governing telecommunications in the United States, as implied by the exam's focus on U.S.-centric Cisco certifications. The correct approach prioritizes a thorough understanding of both the technical capabilities of CUCM and the applicable U.S. regulations, such as those enforced by the FCC and potentially the DOJ for lawful intercept. This involves a systematic review of existing call routing logic, identifying bottlenecks or inefficiencies, and then proposing solutions that not only improve call handling times and resource utilization, but also explicitly maintain or enhance compliance with lawful intercept requirements and data privacy mandates. For instance, ensuring that call detail records, CDR, are generated accurately and that any mobility features do not inadvertently circumvent lawful intercept mechanisms is paramount. This approach represents best professional practice because it integrates technical optimization with a non-negotiable commitment to legal and ethical standards, safeguarding the organization from potential legal repercussions and maintaining public trust. Incorrect approaches fail by either neglecting regulatory considerations entirely or by misinterpreting their implications. One incorrect approach might focus solely on technical metrics like call setup time or agent availability, without verifying that these optimizations do not compromise lawful intercept capabilities. This is a regulatory failure because it could lead to non-compliance with legal obligations to provide access to call data for law enforcement purposes. Another incorrect approach might involve implementing mobility features that inadvertently route calls through unmonitored paths, thereby creating blind spots for lawful intercept. This is an ethical and regulatory failure as it actively obstructs legal oversight. A third incorrect approach could be to over-engineer security measures that inadvertently hinder legitimate call processing or data access for authorized personnel, leading to operational inefficiencies and potential compliance issues if critical data becomes inaccessible. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a structured approach. First, clearly define the optimization goals. Second, conduct a comprehensive audit of the current system, identifying technical and compliance gaps. Third, research and evaluate potential solutions, rigorously assessing their technical feasibility and regulatory impact. Fourth, consult with legal and compliance departments to validate proposed changes. And finally, implement and monitor the optimized solution, ensuring ongoing adherence to all relevant regulations. Question 10. Consider a scenario where a multinational corporation is implementing Cisco Unified Communications Manager, CUCM, and Cisco Expressway for advanced call control and mobility services across its global offices. The company intends to leverage features such as call recording for quality assurance, user presence information for collaboration, and mobile client access for remote employees. Given the strict regulatory framework governing data privacy and telecommunications in the European Union, EU, which of the following approaches best ensures compliance with data protection laws like the GDPR when deploying these services? Option A. Deploy the Cisco solutions with default security settings and rely on the vendor's general privacy statements, assuming that standard security features are sufficient for regulatory compliance. Option B. Develop a broad, generic privacy policy that covers all company IT systems, and assume that this general policy will adequately address the specific data processing activities of the new call control and mobility services. Option C. Implement the services immediately to gain business benefits and address any potential privacy concerns or regulatory gaps through ad hoc adjustments and updates after the system is operational. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive data protection impact assessment (DPIA) to identify and mitigate privacy risks before deployment, ensuring data minimization, purpose limitation, and robust security measures are integrated into the service configuration. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive data protection impact assessment, DPIA, to identify and mitigate privacy risks before deployment, ensuring data minimization, purpose limitation, and robust security measures are integrated into the service configuration. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between implementing advanced communication features for business efficiency and adhering to strict data privacy regulations. The need to ensure seamless call control and mobility services for a global workforce must be balanced against the legal obligations to protect sensitive customer and employee data. Misinterpreting or overlooking these regulatory requirements can lead to severe legal penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. The complexity arises from the distributed nature of modern workforces and the diverse legal landscapes they operate within, requiring a nuanced understanding of applicable laws. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a proactive and comprehensive data privacy impact assessment, DPIA, before deploying any new call control or mobility services. This aligns with the principles of data protection by design and by default, as mandated by regulations like the GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, which is a primary regulatory framework for this exam's jurisdiction. A DPIA systematically identifies potential privacy risks associated with the processing of personal data, evaluates their necessity and proportionality, and outlines measures to mitigate them. For CLASSM services, this would include scrutinizing how call recordings, location data, and user presence information are handled, stored, and secured, implementing robust encryption, anonymization techniques where feasible, and strict access controls are crucial outcomes of such an assessment. This approach ensures that the organization not only complies with legal mandates, but also demonstrates a commitment to ethical data handling, fostering trust with both customers and employees. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing the services first and then attempting to retroactively address privacy concerns is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This reactive approach often leads to the discovery of noncompliance after data has already been exposed or mishandled, making remediation more complex and costly. It violates the principle of data protection by design, as privacy considerations were not integrated from the outset. Relying solely on vendor-provided security features without independent verification and risk assessment is another failure. While vendors offer security, the responsibility for compliance with specific jurisdictional laws rests with the deploying organization. Generic privacy policies that do not specifically address the data processing activities of the new CLASSM services are insufficient. They fail to provide concrete safeguards for the types of data collected and processed by advanced call control and mobility solutions, leaving the organization vulnerable to breaches and regulatory scrutiny. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a scenario should adopt a risk-based approach, prioritizing regulatory compliance and data privacy as foundational elements of any technology deployment. The decision-making process should begin with a thorough understanding of all applicable data protection laws in the relevant jurisdictions. This involves consulting legal counsel and privacy experts. A DPIA should be a mandatory step, integrated into the project lifecycle from the initial planning phase. When selecting and configuring CLASSM solutions, prioritize features that enhance privacy and security. Continuous monitoring and auditing of the deployed systems are essential to ensure ongoing compliance and to adapt to evolving threats and regulations. This proactive, integrated, and risk-aware methodology ensures that business objectives are met without compromising legal obligations or ethical responsibilities. Question 11. The investigation demonstrates that a large enterprise with multiple geographically dispersed offices and a significant number of remote employees is migrating its on-premises Cisco Unified Communications Manager (CUCM) cluster to a new, more robust deployment. A critical requirement for this migration is to ensure that all users, regardless of their location or device, can place emergency calls E911 and that the Public Safety Answering Point (SAP) receives accurate dispatchable location information. The technical team is debating the most effective strategy to meet this absolute priority. Which of the following strategies best ensures compliance with US E911 regulations and provides the most reliable emergency call routing for all users in this complex environment? Option A. Configure CLASSM to rely solely on the PSTN gateway to provide E911 location information to the SAP, assuming the gateway has a static address associated with the main corporate headquarters. Option B. Implement a comprehensive E911 solution that integrates with CLASSM, ensuring each user's device and location are accurately registered and dynamically updated, and that this dispatchable location data is transmitted to the SAP for every emergency call. Option C. Configure CLASSM with basic E911 settings, assuming that the default location information provided by the IP phones will be sufficient for emergency services, as the company has a policy of only allowing employees to work from approved office locations. Option D. Prioritize the implementation of advanced mobility features like extension mobility and seamless roaming, with E911 functionality being a secondary consideration to be addressed after the mobility services are fully operational. The correct answer is A. Configure CLASSM to rely solely on the PSTN gateway to provide E911 location information to the SAP, assuming the gateway has a static address associated with the main corporate headquarters. Explanation. The investigation demonstrates a scenario where a company is implementing a new Cisco Unified Communications Manager (CLASSM) cluster for a multi-site enterprise. The challenge lies in ensuring that call routing and mobility services are configured to comply with specific regulatory requirements for emergency services, e.g., E911, in the U.S. context, as this exam is U.S.-centric. The professional challenge is to balance the technical requirements of advanced call control and mobility with the absolute priority of ensuring reliable and compliant emergency call routing, especially considering the potential for remote workers and distributed sites. This requires a deep understanding of how CLASSM handles location information, how it interacts with public safety answering points, SAP, and the legal obligations associated with providing accurate location data for emergency calls. The correct approach involves meticulously configuring E911 services within CLASSM, ensuring that each endpoint is associated with a valid location that can be translated to a SAP. This includes leveraging features like location-based dialing, location tracking, and potentially integrating with third-party E911 solutions that provide enhanced location data and management. This approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the regulatory mandate to provide accurate emergency caller location information. Failure to do so can result in significant legal liabilities, fines, and, most importantly, endanger public safety by delaying or misdirecting emergency responders. The Cisco documentation and relevant U.S. FCC regulations, e.g., Kari's Law, Ray-Baum Act, provide the framework for this compliance. An incorrect approach would be to assume that default CLASSM configurations are sufficient for E911 compliance, especially in a multi-site or remote worker environment. This overlooks the critical need for granular location mapping and the regulatory requirement for dispatchable location information. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize mobility features like seamless roaming or extension mobility without adequately integrating them with the E911 framework. This could lead to situations where a user's emergency call is routed with inaccurate or missing location data, as their current physical location is not correctly registered with the E911 system. A third incorrect approach would be to rely solely on the public switched telephone network, PSTN gateway, to handle E911 information without configuring CLASSM to pass accurate location data to the gateway. This abdicates responsibility for location accuracy and fails to meet the spirit and letter of the regulations. Each of these incorrect approaches represents a failure to adhere to the absolute priority of E911 compliance, leading to potential regulatory violations and ethical breaches concerning public safety. The professional reasoning process should involve a thorough understanding of the relevant U.S. regulatory landscape for E911. This includes consulting Cisco's best practices for E911 implementation, understanding the capabilities and limitations of CLASSM E911 features, and performing rigorous testing to validate that emergency calls are routed correctly with accurate location information from all potential user locations, including remote and mobile endpoints. A risk assessment should be conducted to identify potential failure points and mitigation strategies. Question 12. Upon reviewing a request from a law enforcement agency for lawful intercept capabilities on a specific user's communication services within the U.S., the network administrator identifies that the user utilizes a combination of voice, instant messaging, and video conferencing services. The request is accompanied by a valid court order specifying the user's identity and the services to be monitored. However, the administrator is concerned about the potential for overcollection of data and the security implications of enabling intercept on all communication types simultaneously without further clarification. What is the most appropriate course of action for the network administrator to take? Option A. Implement the lawful intercept for voice communications only, as this is typically the primary focus of such requests, and defer monitoring of other services pending further clarification. Option B. Inform the law enforcement agency that the system's complexity makes it impossible to fulfill the request and suggest they resubmit a request for a single communication type. Option C. Proceed with configuring the lawful intercept to capture all communication traffic from the specified user as per the court order, ensuring all services are monitored. Option D. Verify the specific scope of the court order to confirm which communication types are explicitly authorized for interception, and configure the lawful intercept accordingly, escalating for clarification if any ambiguity exists regarding instant messaging and video conferencing. The correct answer is C. Proceed with configuring the lawful intercept to capture all communication traffic from the specified user as per the court order, ensuring all services are monitored. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in implementing advanced call control and mobility services, balancing the need for robust security with user accessibility and operational efficiency. The challenge lies in interpreting and applying the relevant regulatory framework, which in this context is the U.S. regulatory framework governing telecommunications services, specifically focusing on aspects related to lawful intercept and data privacy, as mandated by regulations such as the Communications Assistance for Law Enforcement Act (CALIA). The ambiguity in the initial request, coupled with the potential for misinterpreting security protocols, necessitates a thorough understanding of both technical capabilities and legal obligations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach demonstrates best professional practice by prioritizing compliance with CALIA and other relevant U.S. privacy laws. This involves a structured process of verifying the legitimacy of the request, ensuring proper authorization, and implementing the lawful intercept capabilities in a manner that minimizes risk and adheres to established security protocols. This approach is professionally sound because it directly addresses the legal requirements for lawful intercept, ensuring that the organization is not in violation of federal law. It also reflects a commitment to data security and privacy by not blindly implementing a request without due diligence. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing the lawful intercept without verifying the request's legitimacy and authorization is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It bypasses critical security checkpoints designed to prevent unauthorized access to sensitive communication data, potentially violating CALIA and other privacy statutes. This could lead to severe legal penalties, reputational damage, and a breach of trust with customers. Configuring the lawful intercept to capture all traffic from the specified user, regardless of the specific service or communication type, is also problematic. While seemingly comprehensive, it may exceed the scope of the lawful intercept order and infringe upon the user's privacy rights beyond what is legally mandated. This could lead to overcollection of data, which is a regulatory concern and an ethical overreach. Ignoring the request due to perceived complexity or potential security risks without proper consultation or escalation is an abdication of professional responsibility. While security is paramount, outright refusal without exploring compliance solutions can hinder legitimate law enforcement efforts and may not align with the organization's obligations under CALIA. It also fails to address the underlying technical and procedural gaps that led to the initial challenge. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field must adopt a decision-making process that integrates technical expertise with a strong understanding of the legal and ethical landscape. This involves 1. Thoroughly understanding the request and its legal basis. 2. Consulting relevant regulatory frameworks, e.g., CALIA in the U.S. 3. Evaluating technical feasibility against security and privacy requirements. 4. Implementing solutions in a controlled, documented, and authorized manner. 5. escalating complex or ambiguous situations to legal and compliance teams. This systematic approach ensures that actions are both technically sound and legally compliant, safeguarding the organization and its users. Question 13. Stakeholder feedback indicates that users are experiencing difficulties accessing emergency services when utilizing the new mobile extension feature, particularly concerning the accurate transmission of location data. The organization is eager to resolve this issue swiftly to maintain service reliability and user confidence. Which of the following implementation strategies best addresses this challenge while adhering to U.S. regulatory requirements for emergency services and mobility? Option A. Proceed with a rapid deployment of a patch that addresses the immediate reported symptom, assuming that the underlying location services are compliant and that user reports are isolated incidents. Option B. Immediately disable the mobile extension feature until a comprehensive review of its interaction with emergency, call routing, and location services can be completed, ensuring full compliance with FCC mandates for E911 services. Option C. Implement a temporary workaround by instructing users to manually provide their location to emergency responders, while simultaneously initiating a project to integrate enhanced location services that meet FCC E911 requirements. Option D. Focus on optimizing the mobile extension's call quality and feature set, deferring any investigation into emergency service access issues until after the initial user adoption phase has stabilized. The correct answer is B. Immediately disable the mobile extension feature until a comprehensive review of its interaction with emergency, call routing, and location services can be completed, ensuring full compliance with FCC mandates for E911 services. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between rapid deployment of new communication services and the need to ensure compliance with established regulatory frameworks. The CLASSM exam focuses on advanced call control and mobility services, which often involve integration with various network components and services. A key aspect of this is ensuring that these services are implemented in a manner that respects privacy, security, and accessibility mandates. The challenge lies in balancing the technical feasibility and business objectives with the legal and ethical obligations. The correct approach emphasizes a proactive and integrated compliance strategy. By involving legal and compliance teams early in the design and implementation phases, the organization ensures that all technical decisions are vetted against relevant regulations. This approach represents best professional practice because it embeds compliance into the project lifecycle, minimizing the risk of costly retrofits or regulatory penalties. It demonstrates a commitment to responsible technology deployment, fostering trust with stakeholders and customers. Specifically, for the U.S. jurisdiction, this would involve adherence to regulations like the Communications Act of 1934, as amended, particularly concerning lawful intercept capabilities, and potentially FCC rules regarding accessibility for individuals with disabilities. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over due diligence would be to deploy the service without a thorough regulatory review. This poses significant regulatory and ethical failures. For instance, failing to implement lawful intercept capabilities where mandated by U.S. law could lead to severe penalties and legal repercussions. Similarly, neglecting accessibility features for users with disabilities would violate the Americans with Disabilities Act (ADA) and FCC mandates, leading to legal challenges and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on technical functionality without considering data privacy, could lead to breaches of regulations like HIPAA if health-related data is involved, or state-specific privacy laws, resulting in fines and loss of customer trust. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes risk assessment and mitigation. This involves understanding the regulatory landscape relevant to the services being implemented, identifying potential compliance gaps, and developing strategies to address them. Collaboration with legal, compliance, and security teams is crucial. A phased approach to implementation, with clear checkpoints for regulatory review, is also advisable. This ensures that technical solutions are not only functional but also legally sound and ethically responsible. Question 14. Examination of the data shows a consistent increase in call setup latency and occasional call drops during peak hours within the advanced call control system. The current routing logic is a static, sequential hunt group. What is the most effective approach to optimize call routing and improve performance? Option A. Deploy a completely new, more complex routing script with multiple nested decision trees for every possible call scenario. Option B. Increase the bandwidth of the network infrastructure supporting the call control system. Option C. Implement dynamic call routing based on real-time agent availability and call priority, leveraging intelligent queuing mechanisms. Option D. Manually adjust the hunt group timers and add more agents to the existing hunt group without analyzing the routing logic. The correct answer is C. Implement dynamic call routing based on real-time agent availability and call priority, leveraging intelligent queuing mechanisms. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in network operations, optimizing call routing to balance efficiency and user experience while adhering to service-level agreements, SLAs, and potentially regulatory requirements for call handling. The professional challenge lies in identifying the most effective method to achieve these goals without introducing unnecessary complexity or violating established protocols. A deep understanding of call control mechanisms and their impact on performance is crucial for making informed decisions. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the observed performance metrics by leveraging the inherent capabilities of the call control system to dynamically adjust routing. This proactive and data-driven method ensures that resources are utilized optimally, minimizing latency and call setup times, which directly contributes to meeting or exceeding SLA targets. It aligns with the principle of continuous improvement by seeking to enhance existing processes rather than implementing potentially disruptive changes. An incorrect approach that involves manually reconfiguring individual call handlers without a comprehensive analysis of the underlying issues is professionally unacceptable. This is because it is a reactive and potentially inefficient solution that may only address symptoms rather than root causes. It risks introducing configuration errors, increasing administrative overhead, and failing to provide a scalable solution. Furthermore, without proper documentation and testing, such manual changes could inadvertently violate established operational procedures or even specific service-level agreements if they lead to unintended consequences like increased call abandonment rates or degraded call quality. Another incorrect approach, such as implementing a complex, multi-tiered routing logic without a clear business or technical justification, is also professionally unsound. This adds unnecessary complexity to the system, making troubleshooting and maintenance more difficult. It can lead to increased points of failure and can be resource-intensive to manage. From a regulatory or SLA perspective, such over-engineering could lead to non-compliance if the complexity results in unpredictable call routing or delays that fall outside defined parameters. Finally, an approach that focuses solely on increasing the capacity of the existing infrastructure without investigating the efficiency of the call routing logic is a missed opportunity. While increased capacity can alleviate some performance issues, it does not address potential inefficiencies in how calls are being processed. This can lead to unnecessary capital expenditure and does not optimize the existing system's performance. It fails to demonstrate a thorough understanding of process optimization, which prioritizes making existing processes more efficient before resorting to resource augmentation. Professionals should approach such situations by first thoroughly analyzing the available data to identify the root cause of performance degradation. This involves understanding the current call flow, identifying bottlenecks, and correlating observed issues with system metrics. Once the cause is understood, the next step is to evaluate potential solutions based on their effectiveness, efficiency, scalability, and adherence to any relevant SLAs or regulatory guidelines. The decision-making process should prioritize solutions that are data-driven, minimally disruptive, and contribute to long-term system stability and performance. Question 15. Performance analysis shows a recent deployment of Cisco Unified Communications Manager, CLASSM, features for enhanced call routing and mobility services has been flagged for potential noncompliance with data privacy regulations concerning call recording and user data handling. The implementation team is under pressure to resolve this quickly to avoid service disruption and potential regulatory scrutiny. Which of the following actions represents the most professional and compliant approach to address this issue? Option A. Rely on the IT security team's general understanding of data privacy, best practices to make ad hoc configuration changes, without a formal review against specific regulatory mandates. Option B. Conduct a thorough review of the CLASSM configuration, cross-referencing it against the specific data privacy regulations applicable to the organization's jurisdiction, and implement necessary adjustments to ensure compliance before re-enabling any potentially non-compliant features. Option C. Immediately disable all call recording features across the CLASSM environment until a full audit can be completed, prioritizing data privacy over immediate functionality. Option D. Proceed with the deployment as is, assuming the vendor's default configurations meet regulatory requirements, and address any potential issues reactively if they arise. Correct answer is C. Immediately disable all call recording features across the CLASSM environment until a full audit can be completed, prioritizing data privacy over immediate functionality. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in implementing advanced call control and mobility services, balancing the need for robust security and compliance with the operational demands of a dynamic business environment. The challenge lies in interpreting and applying specific regulatory requirements within the context of a rapidly evolving technology landscape. The pressure to quickly deploy new features, coupled with the potential for misconfigurations that could lead to compliance breaches, necessitates a thorough understanding of the applicable regulatory framework. Professionals must navigate the complexities of data privacy, call recording, and secure communication protocols to ensure that the implemented solutions meet both technical and legal obligations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented process of reviewing and validating the configuration against the specific requirements of the relevant regulatory framework. This includes verifying that all security protocols are correctly implemented, that call recording policies are adhered to, and that user access controls are appropriately configured. By proactively identifying and rectifying any deviations from the regulatory standards before deployment, the organization mitigates the risk of non-compliance, potential fines, and reputational damage. This approach demonstrates due diligence and a commitment to operating within legal and ethical boundaries, which is paramount in regulated industries. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing a configuration without a formal validation against the regulatory framework is a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This bypasses critical control points designed to ensure compliance, leaving the organization vulnerable to penalties. Relying solely on vendor defaults or best practices without specific regulatory alignment is also problematic, as these may not fully address the unique requirements of the applicable jurisdiction. Furthermore, assuming that a previous successful deployment will automatically translate to current success ignores the possibility of changes in regulations, technology, or business needs, leading to potential non-compliance. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based decision-making framework. This involves 1. Identifying all applicable regulatory requirements. 2. Assessing the potential impact of non-compliance. 3. Evaluating different implementation strategies against these requirements. 4. Documenting the chosen approach and the rationale behind it. 5. Implementing robust testing and validation procedures. 6. Establishing ongoing monitoring and auditing processes. This structured approach ensures that technical decisions are informed by regulatory obligations and ethical considerations, fostering a culture of compliance and responsible technology deployment. Question 16. Governance review demonstrates that the organization is planning to deploy advanced Cisco mobility services, including features that leverage real-time location data for personalized call routing and presence information. The review highlights a potential gap in understanding how these features align with the organization's data protection obligations under the relevant regulatory framework. What is the most appropriate next step to ensure compliance and mitigate privacy risks? Option A. Proceed with the deployment of the mobility services, assuming that existing general IT security policies will adequately protect user data. Option B. Implement the advanced mobility features and address any privacy concerns that arise after the services are live. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment specifically focused on the privacy implications of each advanced mobility feature, identifying data flows, processing activities, and potential impacts against the applicable regulatory requirements. Option D. Obtain broad, general consent from all users for the collection and processing of their data by the new mobility services. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment specifically focused on the privacy implications of each advanced mobility feature, identifying data flows, processing activities, and potential impacts against the applicable regulatory requirements. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between implementing advanced mobility services for enhanced user experience and ensuring compliance with data privacy regulations. The rapid evolution of technology in call control and mobility services often outpaces the clear articulation of regulatory requirements, necessitating a proactive and informed risk assessment approach. The challenge lies in balancing the benefits of features like location-based services or personalized call routing with the potential for unauthorized data collection or misuse, all within the framework of the specified regulatory environment. Professionals must navigate this by understanding the specific data types involved, the purpose of their collection and processing, and the legal basis for such activities. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves conducting a thorough risk assessment that specifically identifies and evaluates the potential privacy implications of each advanced mobility feature. This assessment must be grounded in the regulatory framework relevant to the exam's jurisdiction. For example, if the jurisdiction mandates specific consent mechanisms for processing location data or requires data minimization principles, the risk assessment must verify that the proposed implementation adheres to these. Best professional practice dictates a proactive stance, where potential risks are identified before implementation, allowing for mitigation strategies to be integrated into the design. This aligns with principles of privacy by design and by default, ensuring that privacy considerations are embedded from the outset, thereby minimizing the likelihood of regulatory noncompliance and ethical breaches. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing advanced mobility features without a specific, documented risk assessment focused on privacy implications is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach assumes that the technology itself is compliant, which is a dangerous oversight. Fails to consider the specific data being processed, the context of its use, and the legal basis for that processing, potentially leading to violations of data protection laws. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on general IT security best practices without a specific privacy lens. While strong security is a component of data protection, it does not inherently address privacy concerns such as the lawful basis for data collection, purpose limitation, or individual rights. This can lead to technically secure but privacy-invasive systems. Finally, assuming that user consent, if obtained broadly, covers all potential data processing activities for advanced mobility features is also an incorrect and risky approach. Regulations often require specific, informed, and granular consent for different types of data processing. A blanket consent may not be legally sufficient and exposes the organization to regulatory penalties and reputational damage. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured risk management framework that integrates privacy considerations throughout the lifecycle of implementing advanced call control and mobility services. This involves 1. Identifying all advanced features and the data they collect, process, or transmit. 2. Mapping these data flows against the specific requirements of the relevant regulatory framework. 3. Conducting a Privacy Impact Assessment (PIA) or Data Protection Impact Assessment (DPIA) as mandated or recommended by regulations. 4. Identifying potential privacy risks and their likelihood and impact. 5. Developing and implementing mitigation strategies, including technical controls, policy changes, and user education. 6. Regularly reviewing and updating the risk assessment as services evolve or regulations change. This systematic process ensures that technological advancements are implemented responsibly and in compliance with legal and ethical obligations. Question 17. Analysis of a financial services firm implementing Cisco Unified Communications Manager, CLASSM, for its call center operations, where regulatory mandates require the recording and secure retention of all customer-facing calls for a minimum of 7 years. The firm is exploring options to meet this requirement, considering the technical capabilities of CLASSM and available integration partners. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework for call recording and data retention in this context? Option A. Integrate CLASSM with a Cisco-validated recording solution that offers encrypted storage, tamper-evident logging, and automated retention policy enforcement, ensuring compliance with the 7-year retention period. Option B. Implement a manual process where supervisors periodically instruct agents to save specific call recordings to a shared network drive, relying on agent discretion for selection and storage. Option C. Deploy a generic, uncertified third-party call recording application that captures audio streams but lacks specific validation for regulatory compliance in the financial services sector. Option D. Disable call recording features on CLASSM to minimize storage infrastructure costs, assuming that the absence of recordings will not be a compliance issue for the firm's specific regulatory oversight. Correct answer is A. Integrate CLASSM with a Cisco-validated recording solution that offers encrypted storage, tamper-evident logging, and automated retention policy enforcement, ensuring compliance with the 7-year retention period. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge in advanced call control and mobility services, ensuring compliance with regulatory requirements for call recording and data retention, while also meeting business needs for efficient storage and retrieval. The challenge lies in balancing the technical capabilities of the Cisco Unified Communications Manager, CLASSM, and its integrated recording solutions with the specific legal obligations of the jurisdiction. Professionals must navigate the complexities of data privacy, security, and accessibility, all while maintaining service availability and performance. The need to select an appropriate recording strategy without compromising these critical factors makes this a professionally demanding situation requiring careful judgment. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves leveraging Cisco's native call recording capabilities within CLASSM, specifically by integrating with a compliant recording solution that adheres to the specified regulatory framework. This approach is best professional practice because it directly addresses the regulatory mandate for recording and retention. By using a solution designed for this purpose, it ensures that recordings are captured accurately, stored securely, and are retrievable for audit or legal purposes as required by law. This method minimizes the risk of noncompliance by utilizing features and integrations that are built with regulatory adherence in mind, such as secure storage, tamper-evident logs, and defined retention policies. It also aligns with the principles of data minimization and purpose limitation, as recordings are made for a specific, legally mandated purpose. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to implement a third-party recording solution that is not certified or validated for compliance with the specific regulatory framework. This is professionally unacceptable because it introduces significant risk of noncompliance. Such a solution may not capture all necessary call metadata, may not store recordings in a legally acceptable format, or may fail to meet data retention and secure access requirements. This could lead to legal penalties, reputational damage, and an inability to produce evidence when required. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on manual methods or ad hoc recording tools for compliance. This is professionally unacceptable as it is inherently unreliable, prone to human error, and unlikely to meet the stringent requirements for data integrity, security, and auditability mandated by regulations. Manual methods are not scalable, cannot guarantee consistent capture of all calls, and lack the necessary audit trails to prove compliance. A further incorrect approach is to disable call recording features to reduce storage costs, without a thorough legal review and explicit exemption from the regulatory body. This is professionally unacceptable, as it directly violates the legal obligation to record calls. The primary driver for call recording in regulated industries is often legal compliance, and bypassing this requirement without proper authorization is a direct breach of law and ethical professional conduct. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such implementation challenges by first thoroughly understanding the specific regulatory requirements of the applicable jurisdiction. This involves consulting legal counsel and reviewing official documentation. Next, they should assess the technical capabilities of the existing infrastructure, such as CLASSM, and identify solutions that are designed for compliance. A risk-based approach is crucial, prioritizing solutions that offer robust security, auditability, and adherence to data retention policies. When evaluating third-party solutions, Verification of their compliance certifications and validation for the specific jurisdiction is paramount. Decision-making should always prioritize legal and ethical obligations over purely cost-driven or convenience-based choices. A proactive approach, involving regular reviews and updates to ensure ongoing compliance as regulations and technologies evolve, is essential. Question 18. Investigation of a Cisco Unified Communications Manager (CUCM) environment reveals that the marketing department has requested access to detailed call records (CDR) and call management records (CMR) to analyze customer calling patterns, believing this data represents a significant competitive advantage. The engineer is tasked with determining the appropriate course of action regarding this request, considering the sensitive nature of the data and potential business implications. Option A. Grant the marketing department direct access to the raw CDR/CMR database, allowing them to perform their own analysis, as the data is considered proprietary and a key to competitive advantage. Option B. Provide the marketing department with anonymized and aggregated CDR/CMR data that highlights general calling trends and feature usage without revealing individual customer information, ensuring compliance with CPNI regulations. Option C. Advise the marketing department that, while direct access is not possible, they can infer competitive advantage from publicly available information about the company's services and infrastructure, as detailed call data is too sensitive to be used for this purpose. Option D. Refuse the marketing department's request outright, stating that all call records are confidential and cannot be shared under any circumstances, without exploring alternative compliant data sharing methods. The correct answer is B. Provide the marketing department with anonymized and aggregated CDR/CMR data that highlights general calling trends and feature usage without revealing individual customer information, ensuring compliance with CPNI regulations. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the potential conflict between a company's desire to maintain a competitive edge and the ethical obligation to protect sensitive customer data. The engineer is privy to information that, if misused or improperly disclosed, could lead to significant financial and reputational damage for both the company and its clients. The challenge lies in navigating the ambiguity of competitive advantage versus confidential information, and understanding the implications of the Cisco Advanced Call Control and Mobility Services (CLASSM) technologies in this context. The engineer must balance their duty to their employer with their professional ethics and any applicable regulations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding of the Cisco Unified Communications Manager (CUCM) and its associated services, specifically focusing on how call detail records (CDR) and call management records (CMR) are generated and stored. These records, while essential for troubleshooting and billing, contain sensitive information about call patterns, durations, and participants. The engineer's responsibility is to ensure that access to and use of this data strictly adheres to the company's data privacy policies and any relevant U.S. regulatory frameworks governing telecommunications data. This includes implementing robust access controls, anonymization techniques where appropriate, and ensuring that any data shared for competitive analysis is aggregated and de-identified to prevent the exposure of individual customer information. The engineer must also be aware of the potential for these records to reveal proprietary information about call routing, feature usage, and integration with other systems, which could indeed constitute a competitive advantage if exploited improperly. Therefore, a cautious and policy-driven approach, prioritizing data protection and compliance, is the most professional and ethical course of action. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach would be to directly share raw CDR/CMR data with the marketing department, believing it solely constitutes a competitive advantage. This fails to recognize that CDRs and CMRs, while valuable for analysis, contain personally identifiable information, PI, and call details that, if exposed without proper anonymization or aggregation, violate U.S. privacy regulations, such as the Customer Proprietary Network Information (CPNI) rules enforced by the FCC. This action would also breach the trust placed in the engineer to handle sensitive data responsibly. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the request entirely without understanding the underlying intent, or exploring compliant methods of data analysis. While protecting data is paramount, outright refusal without investigation might hinder legitimate business analysis that could be conducted ethically and legally. This approach lacks proactive problem solving and could be perceived as uncooperative. A third incorrect approach would be to assume that competitive advantage automatically permits the use of any data, regardless of its sensitive nature. This demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of ethical data handling and regulatory compliance. The definition of competitive advantage in a business context does not supersede legal and ethical obligations to protect customer data. The engineer must critically evaluate what constitutes legitimate business intelligence versus a breach of privacy. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field must adopt a decision-making process that prioritizes data security and regulatory compliance. When faced with requests for sensitive data, the first step is to understand the specific data requested and its potential implications. This involves consulting company policies on data handling, privacy, and acceptable use of technology. Next, the engineer should assess the request against relevant U.S. regulations, such as CP&I rules and internal compliance guidelines. If the request appears to involve sensitive data, the engineer should explore anonymization, aggregation, or de-identification techniques to fulfill the business need without compromising privacy. If a compliant solution cannot be found, or if the request itself appears to be for an unethical or illegal purpose, the engineer should escalate the issue to their manager or legal/compliance department for guidance. This structured approach ensures that decisions are informed, ethical, and legally sound, protecting both the individual and the organization. Question 19. The evaluation methodology shows a company deploying a new Cisco Unified Communications Manager, CLASSM, cluster to support both on-premises and remote workers across multiple U.S. locations. The primary concern is ensuring that all users can reliably access emergency services, E911, and that accurate location information is transmitted to public safety answering points, SAP, in accordance with U.S. federal regulations. The IT team is evaluating different strategies for configuring the CLASSM cluster to meet these requirements. Which of the following configuration strategies best aligns with U.S. regulatory requirements for E911 services in this scenario? Option A. Defer E911 configuration until after the initial CLASSM deployment is complete and stable, addressing it as a lower priority item. Option B. Configure the CLASSM cluster to rely solely on the caller's registered phone number for E911 location information. Assuming this is sufficient for all user types, Option C. Implement a comprehensive E911 solution that integrates with location databases, utilizes ALI, automatic location identification data, and supports dynamic location updates for mobile and remote users, ensuring compliance with FCC mandates. Option D. Configure E911 to route calls to a single, central SAP regardless of the caller's physical location, simplifying management. The correct answer is B. Configure the CLASSM cluster to rely solely on the caller's registered phone number for E911 location information, assuming this is sufficient for all user types. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows a scenario where a company is implementing a new Cisco Unified Communications Manager, CLASSM, cluster and needs to ensure compliance with U.S. regulatory requirements for emergency services, specifically E911. The professional challenge lies in balancing the technical implementation of advanced call control and mobility services with the stringent legal obligations for emergency call routing and location information. Misinterpreting or overlooking these regulations can lead to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and most critically, failure to provide essential emergency services to users. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding and application of the relevant U.S. regulations, such as those mandated by the Federal Communications Commission, FCC, for E911 services. This includes ensuring that the CLASSM cluster is configured to accurately determine and transmit the caller's location information to the Public Safety Answering Point, SAP. Best professional practice dictates a proactive and comprehensive approach to compliance, involving detailed planning, configuration verification, and ongoing testing of E911 functionality. This ensures that the system reliably supports emergency calls, fulfilling both technical and legal requirements, An incorrect approach would be to assume that default CLASSM configurations are sufficient for E911 compliance. This overlooks the specific nuances of US E911 regulations, which often require granular configuration of location data, especially in mobile or remote worker scenarios. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize cost savings or implementation speed over regulatory adherence. This demonstrates a failure to grasp the critical nature of emergency services and the severe legal and ethical ramifications of noncompliance. Furthermore, neglecting to test E911 functionality thoroughly after implementation or any significant system changes is a direct violation of best practices and regulatory expectations, as it leaves the system's emergency capabilities unverified. Professionals should adopt a decision-making process that begins with a comprehensive review of all applicable US E911 regulations. This should be followed by a detailed design phase that explicitly addresses how the CLASSM cluster will meet these requirements, including location tracking and routing. Implementation must include rigorous configuration checks and extensive testing, simulating various user scenarios. Finally, a process for ongoing monitoring and periodic revalidation of E911 functionality should be established to ensure sustained compliance. Question 20. Research into the implementation of Cisco Unified Communications Manager, CLASSM, for advanced call control and mobility services in a regulated environment, specifically focusing on ensuring compliance with lawful intercept requirements and data privacy regulations within the United States. A key consideration is the selection of a CLASSM configuration that allows for the capture and delivery of call detail records, CDR, and call content for authorized law enforcement agencies, while also safeguarding sensitive user data according to established privacy frameworks. Which of the following approaches best aligns with these regulatory and technical objectives? Option A. Utilizing a CLASSM version that is known to have fewer security patches but is more cost-effective, with the understanding that lawful intercept can be retrofitted with custom scripting. Option B. Deploying a CLASSM solution without specific lawful intercept capabilities, relying on third-party tools for data capture after the fact, and assuming general data security measures are sufficient for privacy. Option C. Implementing a CLASSM configuration that leverages Cisco's native lawful intercept features and ensures all sensitive call data is encrypted in transit and at rest, adhering to relevant U.S. privacy laws. Option D. Configuring CLASSM to prioritize call routing efficiency and user experience above all else, with a plan to address lawful intercept and data privacy concerns only if specifically requested by authorities. The correct answer is C. Implementing a CLASSM configuration that leverages Cisco's native lawful intercept features and ensures all sensitive call data is encrypted in transit and at rest, adhering to relevant U.S. privacy laws. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between implementing advanced mobility services and adhering to strict regulatory compliance, specifically concerning data privacy and lawful interception capabilities. The need to ensure seamless call control and mobility for users must be balanced against the legal obligations of service providers. Careful judgment is required to select a solution that not only meets technical requirements, but also satisfies all applicable regulatory mandates without compromising user privacy or security. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a solution that is inherently compliant with the specified regulatory framework. By selecting a Cisco Unified Communications Manager, CLASSM, configuration that supports lawful intercept mechanisms and adheres to data privacy standards, the organization demonstrates a commitment to legal and ethical operation. This proactive integration of compliance into the technical design ensures that the mobility services are deployed responsibly, minimizing the risk of regulatory penalties and maintaining user trust. The chosen solution aligns with the principles of privacy by design and security by default, which are cornerstones of modern regulatory compliance in telecommunications. An incorrect approach that fails to consider lawful intercept capabilities would be professionally unacceptable. This failure constitutes a direct regulatory violation, as it would prevent the service provider from fulfilling its legal obligations to cooperate with law enforcement requests. Such an oversight could lead to significant fines, legal action, and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach that overlooks data privacy standards, such as inadequate encryption or improper data handling, would violate data protection regulations. This could result in breaches of user confidentiality, loss of customer trust, and severe penalties under privacy laws. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes cost savings over compliance by choosing a less secure or non-compliant solution is ethically unsound and professionally negligent. It demonstrates a disregard for legal obligations and user rights, exposing the organization to substantial risks. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of all applicable regulatory requirements. This involves consulting legal counsel and compliance officers early in the project lifecycle. The next step is to evaluate technical solutions against these requirements, prioritizing those that offer built-in compliance features or can be readily configured to meet mandates. A risk assessment should then be conducted to identify potential compliance gaps and develop mitigation strategies. Finally, ongoing monitoring and auditing are crucial to ensure continued adherence to regulations as the technology and legal landscape evolve.